Julius puts up a three. Yes! And
Bearcat Blitz coming at you with another pair of episodes this week as we completely wind down the college basketball season and start up portal season, plus the back half of spring football for the UC Bearcats. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, joined as always by my co-host, Neil Meyer. Check us out on bearcatstalk.com or all Bearcats. Still can find the domain there, or you can check Neil out on frontofficenews.com as well. All of the coverage on those two spots, and right here, the show on Talking Cash with Russ Heltman on the YouTube page. You can watch us there, and you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, check us out in visual and auditory mediums on Bally Sports Ohio. Whatever TV service provider you subscribe to can most often find Bally Sports Ohio. There, Neil, we got a litany of topics to talk about. No games to discuss for you and I for the first time since we started doing this show. We have had games to talk about every single time for the most part. And now we enter the off-season stretch, get to a couple news and notes. We start with the transfer portal in college basketball. We'll move to pro day results and the impact of Jowon Briggs. Nice showing in the 40-yard dash and top showing in this class in the bench press. Get to some numbers from Daniel Greshik as well, and just overall thoughts on the Big 12 Pro Day event down in Texas. And then pick your portal path. Neil and I kind of give the position and kind of lane that we would go down in the transfer portal for UC basketball, a pivotal transfer portal, a pivotal offseason, and an offseason that could elevate and boost Cincinnati into that true contender status in the Big 12 if they go through things correctly in this fourth offseason under Wes Miller. Has just precipitously gotten better and better with it each year, and a big opportunity this time around in what will maybe be one of the most lucrative off seasons yet in terms of pure talent added. When you think about the top 60 prospects in Tyler Betsy and Tyler McKinley coming in as freshmen, plus whatever one or two premier transfers they end up adding, I'll be shocked if we don't get at least one big name added to the coffers here. But Neil, we start with Josh Loeffler, assistant coach, headed to Loyola, Maryland. He takes the head gig there. I think this is a decent loss for Wes Miller and the Bearcats. Loeffler was obviously a big part of the game planning and the scheming every single night in and night out in the Big 12 and throughout their tournament run in the NIT so far this season, or through this season that just wrapped up. I think it's a decent loss for Cincinnati, and another sign, Neil, that Wes Miller and Scott Satterfield are hiring the right assistants for their staff, because anytime you get a guy that leaves for a head coaching position at the D1 level, it's obviously a step up from the assistant coach ranks.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And you talk about it. Josh Loeffler came to Cincinnati prior to the 2023-2024 season, where he spent the last 6 seasons as the head coach of Johns Hopkins. It was a D3 program, but he did fantastic things at that program before coming to Cincinnati. And as you mentioned, it's a significant loss. Obviously, he did a lot of the game planning and the schematic stuff behind the scenes, but he was very vocal on the bench throughout the season for Wes Miller and the staff. But he was here on a 1-year contract deal, and I don't know if many people know that, but it was just a 1-year deal kind of thing. Now he's the new head coach at Loyola, Maryland, and he's very familiar with that area, but couldn't be any more happier for Coach Loeffler. Obviously, we have had great interactions with him, one of the nicest guys that you were going to meet. So really wishing him the best, to him and his family, as they make this next journey back to Maryland, where he becomes the new head coach of Loyola, Maryland.
Yeah, man, it's really cool because he was an assistant coach there, was a part of that staff back in the early 2010s. Obviously, as you mentioned, goes on to Johns Hopkins from there. And then you get that full circle moment where your first chance at a head coaching gig at the D1 level is back at a spot that really gave you a lot of runway and leeway and just growing surface and area and time back at Loyola in the 2010s. That sparks his run to Johns Hopkins. Great success there. And obviously the Bearcats, we talked about it last week, Neil, and kind of the season wrap up. Year over year over year, this program has improved consistency and just overall positive output from a talent and results level, just yet to get into the NCAA tournament, yet to punch that ticket. But Josh Leffler was a key reason why they took another significant step when you think about jumping to the toughest conference in America and hovering around the same win total as they did in the AAC last season. So Leffler headed to the Patriot League, back to the Patriot League, and we'll see. Maybe they end up scheduling Loyola as one of the bye games, one of the non-conference games, to have him come back to Fifth Third Arena either this year or the coming years. Wouldn't be shocked to see that happen, given the relationship between Leffler and Wes Miller. Neil, relationships key. The bread and butter for this program over the next few months, building them, establishing them, and marking some key relationships with premier talents. And it's already really started. We touched on some of the names that have been contacted by UC last week. Let's go ahead and run through those again as of today. We had a new one get entered in also that I'll start with. When we think about Iowa transfer guard Tony Perkins, kind of a wing guard combo, hearing from Cincinnati, averaged 14 points this past season, originally from Indianapolis, so could kind of get closer to home if he picks Cincinnati, get his family to a few more games as opposed to playing in the cornfields in Iowa. 6'4", averaged 14 points, as I mentioned, and kind of fits a similar mold to a lot of these guys they've already contacted. Raheem Moss, Toledo guard, they reached out to him. He's 15.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, 3 assists, 6'4", 205-pound guard. Jalen Counter out of IUPUI, junior guard, 6'3", 185 pounds, 14 points, 3 assists, 3.9 rebounds. Also reached out to Greg Gordon, Iona junior guard, 16 points per game across 24 appearances this past season, 7.3 rebounds, shot 54.8% from the field. Kanan Carlisle, one of the best prospects in the transfer portal, really in the top 10 of all the major rankings right now. 6'3", 185-pound, top 50 2023 recruit. So freshman with 3 years of eligibility left, average 11.5 points, 2.7 rebounds, and 2.7 assists. And then obviously Marquise Warwick, they reached out to him as well. 1 year of eligibility left for Warwick. Horizon League legend, all-time leading scorer at Northern Kentucky University, posted 19.9 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 2.4 assists this past season, albeit on heavy volume and low efficiency, just a 49% effective field goal mark. There's a clear focus, Neil, to start this transfer portal session for Cincinnati. We need to get a dynamic scoring guard, and we need to get them in as early as possible to kind of mark that as your premier player, and then go through kind of these conversations over this week and these ensuing days where the staff will be sitting down with players and going through their just straight up honest projections for what they see for them on this program next season. And then we'll see if some guys end up making some decisions to leave going forward and opening up more spots. But at the very least, Neil, it seems like they are heavily interested in wanting to add a premier scoring guard with some size at that. Part of what the debate that you and I were talking about last week or 2 weeks ago, will they want to start Jizzle James and Day Thomas together? Based on these conversations, there is no plans to do that, at least in a heavy minute workload for both those guys on the floor type of play.
Yeah, and it's a great point that you mentioned, Russ, that most of these guys that they have contacted so far are point guards, combo guards, but that is something that if you look at the roster from the 2023-2024 season, they had 2 point guards for 90% of the season. Simas
Well, the whole season, right? I mean, unless you're going to play CJ Anthony, but they never really wanted to trust a non-scholarship player in Anthony.
Before CJ Frederick gets hurt, you could kind of trust him bringing the ball up a little bit.
That's true. Yeah.
They were going to rely on Simas Lukosius to potentially bring the ball up once Day Thomas went down with the injury, in terms of giving Jizzle James some rest, but they really had no depth at that point guard position. And we saw that towards the end of the season. And that's where a lot of people, Russ, we talked about it earlier in the season, where people were kind of confused that, why is Rayvon Griffith redshirting compared to Jizzle James? Well, the situations there at those two positions were certainly unmatched. There was just little depth at the point guard position, and there was a lot of depth at the wing position. This upcoming season, they're looking to add potentially a guard, and I mean, it's visibly known from who they have contacted through the transfer portal as we discuss those names. But adding depth at that point guard position is going to be so valuable and so key, especially as they make this transition into year 2 in the Big 12. So overall, I'm not surprised we're seeing a lot of guards' names pop up, but it's going to be a significant time in the transfer portal because the guard play, you're looking at the transfer portal right now, Russ. I'm fairly certain they're sitting close to roughly 850 names in the transfer portal.
900 plus as of this weekend.
Teams are still playing in the Final Four, so you might never know what happened. Teams just got knocked out. You might never know what happened. So overall, I mean, it's not surprising they're looking to add some guards, but overall, the depth at that point guard position, you can never go wrong with.
Right, and it's a position of strength in this portal. It typically is in the transfer portal. You're just going to have, just based on physics and birth rates and all that stuff, there's going to be way less 6'8" to 6'10" dynamic scoring forwards that can also defend, as opposed to you're going to have way more 6'3" and up, 6'2" and up guards in the portal, just in the pool of player options that are going to be able to defend and score at a high level. And that's a huge thing for Cincinnati. It doesn't seem, Neil, like they're going to need to go fight for some of these major wings, some of these big high-level talents at the wing position, because as you mentioned, Dan Skilling's hitting his stride very well at the end of his sophomore season. I mean, he's a guy that might even be testing the NBA waters in terms of not necessarily declaring, but just seeing what he has to do from scouts and from the league to get into that conversation in 2025. Simas Lukosius, another strong wing right there. Rayvon Griffith, as you mentioned, strong wing. Tyler Betsy, a strong wing, a guy that I see getting minutes in his freshman season. Tyler McKinley comes in, not necessarily a wing, but another one of those run-the-floor, high-level power forward prospects that you're not going to need to look for in the transfer portal. Neil, it feels like as we kind of wind down this first segment, Cincinnati has recruited with this in mind. They've laid out the plan well with this in mind, knowing what the current climate of college basketball is and thinking, hey, we're going to be able to maybe get a signature guard with multiple years of eligibility left, which is going to be huge here, Neil, with these transfers, because when you look at the scholarship sheet on bearcatbunch.com, one of my favorite resources to use, it's just really easy to kind of see what the total roster breakdown is. You got 6 seniors right now making up this roster out of 13 scholarships. So you're going to want to get a guy that has multiple years of eligibility left to kind of bridge these 2 years and be able to bridge to the next generation of forwards that you're going to have in Betsy and Tyler McKinley. But over the last 2 years, Neil, this staff has done a great job of setting themselves up to fully hit the booster fluids, hit the rocket engagers, and jumpstart this thing going into the second year of the Big 12 with a full complement of all the recruiting and transfer work they've done, seeing as they don't have to do a lot of hard work, a lot of hard fighting, a lot of big bag dropping, in my opinion, for a wing this time around. They can maybe put some more of that ammo, some more of that cheddar into the best kind of scoring guard options out there, and you're not going to have as much competition for those guards because of the dynamics of the portal that we just laid out. Could be a kind of coup type of building brewing in Cincinnati, which is the way they have in the modern college basketball landscape navigated things over the first 3 off seasons of Wes Miller's tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you discussed a guy in Tyler McKinley right now, Russ. I'm not sure if you've seen all the stats he's putting up over there in Italy, but
Spain or in Italy, he would lit. I mean, those Italians, they got a long way to go with that age group of Americans right there. They were lighting those kids up, Neil. I mean, McKinley, I don't think I saw one stat line where he had less than 15 and 10 on in terms of points and rebounds. It was
one was like what, 31 and 19 or something. It's something crazy. And he won a dunk contest in sweats. Like, let's talk about those slight flex real quick.
And so he's been super engaged too. Like almost every home game, especially in conference play, especially as the high school basketball season wind down. Yeah, him and Rayvon getting shots
right up after the game with Rayvon Griffith, right after every home game. Bearcat, man, through and through. It's Tyler McKinley. So future's bright for him. But as you talked about it, Russ, this offseason is going to be a little different from what it was last season. Obviously, last season, the focus was on a big wing and the front court. This season, it might be different because you're looking at the front court. All of the front court players still have eligibility left, including Victor Locken. Outside of Odi Aguama, everybody in the front court has eligibility left. So it's different this time around. So now that they really have their front court hopefully locked and settled in, they can now focus their things to the backcourt and really try to get a young point guard, as you mentioned earlier.
No doubt. And I think, and we'll what I would do and how things would get handled, and we'll kind of touch on that. We got to get to it in the final segment of today's show. We'll take a quick break here, wrapping up the first look at the transfer portal, getting to some pro day results for Jowon Briggs and the rest of the Cincinnati Bearcats contingent down in Texas from this past weekend. Bearcat Blitz continues after these messages. A nice showing for Jowon Briggs and plenty of Bearcats across the Big 12 Pro Day action. The big fellas kind of took center stage, though, Neil, and namely Jowon Briggs did on this this cool event, during this cool event that the Big 12 is doing. They're basically, you and I were talking about this at practice, UC football practice last week. They're kind of just trying to do away with all of the school pro days, make them one big event down in Texas. I believe they did it at the Star facility down in Dallas.
Yep.
That is. And it's, I think, an awesome thing because it gets a full magnifying glass on the entire conference. You get no excuse. There's no excuse not to be at this event if you're an NFL team or just any team for that matter, whether you're in the UFL or the NFL looking for talent. And I think it's just a great way to help boost the stock of a guy and guys like Jowon Briggs, who, Neil, I mean, I'm not saying I would be surprised if he goes undrafted this year because I don't know. I can't hold my breath out for any fringe draft